Okay, so let's start creating this code. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new variable, and I will talk about variables in a second, called my email address. And I'm going to assign this a string of my email address, which is sean.t.cameron@gmail.com. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about strings is in PHP is not a strongly typed language. Now, what that means is that if I create a variable in something like C++, C, etc., you give it a type. So you give it an integer, a char, a string. And then everything you put into that variable has to be of that type. And there's some validation in some parts of that if it's an object. But if it's very strongly typed in that you create something of a integer, so you have to put an integer into it. With PHP, there's I haven't put a type. It's not strongly typed, which means that whereas I've given this a string, I could later on use the same variable and give it an integer value, and it's quite happy with that. So it doesn't do that kind of validation on the variables. So that's why it's not strongly typed, as opposed to something that's a strongly typed like C, C++. That's enough. I just wanted to explain that very quickly. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a subject. You noticed in my previous creation, I didn't create a subject line. That's because I'm just going to give it a bog standard subject so that I know that it's come from here. So you go question from just do it. You could easily have a subject line on your web page. I just chose to create it statically just to have, I always know it's come from this particular page. Now this next part, I'm going to create the variables that are passed in, and what we do, we say post. So this is something that's been posted into the page, and from the name of it, called name, you could probably guess it's going to be name. So this is coming from our name field in our previous page, and that's now being deciphered by this $post and put into this name variable. So the next thing I'm going to do is email. Same again, and then this is equal to $post, and then again it's email, semicolon, and then next one is going to be message. We tab that in, sorry, and then that's equal to again $_post, and then guessed it again, message, and then the last thing we're going to need is a header, and this is required for our mail function that we're going to call. So we're going to say $header is equal to, and then from, and then you just type this as is, and then we say $name, and then open bracket, also brace, or whatever you call that, less than, I'll call it. So that's the easiest thing to call it. And then we've got like $email. Okay, and that is basically setting up a header, saying, when you open up an email, if the email has a header that has this from name and email address, and that's how they know where it's come from, etc. And then next we're going to use the function mail, which is a PHP function, and we pass in $my email address, okay, and then comma $subject, comma $message, comma, and then our header, which is the email address information. And that's it. That is actually the PHP code to post all the information that's sent in from our contact us page. You could have some a message saying outgoing, say P, thanks for sending. Actually, we don't want that inside the PHP. We want that outside the PHP. Okay, so we know that. Otherwise, it gets interpreted as PHP. Thanks for sending. There is output commands that you can use in PHP, but it's easy just to use a nice P tag from within the HTML. So that's our PHP code done now. That's our PHP code completed. Let me just have indent that one, make it all nice and even. So I can't run this from my local machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload this onto my web space, or a web space, which has PHP, and then we're going to run it and show it working in action.